he isn't betraying his English heritage.
And he won't lose the progress that we're making at home.
Yes, whatever that may be. In our home, it's technological. It's a constant movement toward easier living by means of the machine. But I don't think that progress and civilization go together particularly. I know that's a dangerous thing to say, but I happen to believe it. Dangerous, I mean that I'm likely to start an awful lot of discussion. I think that if you move forward, you are not likely to be very civilized in the process. And the most civilized countries are likely to be those where progress is not considered a very important preoccupation. And I think it's awful good for a kid, and awfully good for us, too, occasionally, to get away from those areas where moving somewhere and getting something done seems to be more important than living in a certain way and being a certain thing.
What we need are intervals, all of us, in backwaters.
I don't think everybody, we grown-ups or kids either, should be hustled through our lives without a chance to examine the things that our fathers and grandfathers knew and valued and which have helped to make our civilization.
And keep them and add them on to what we're getting.
That's it.
Well, in principle, I think all children should be at home for their adolescence, which is a period when you're trying to find out who you are. But childhood is another thing, and that's the time to get that something extra, that sense of growth. That's the time to pick up your second language as if it belonged to you.
The childhood
The childhood, when you can speak without those things that happen to your tongue and mouth that tangle you up so you never can be perfectly natural in another language.
And then there's, of course, the extra richness that comes from having lived in more than one part of the world and in contact with more than one point of view. And that's a defense for giving children some few years in places that aren't exactly homeland. Well, Lael, you've been a working journalist a long time. You've visited and lived in a lot of countries, haven't you?
Quite a few.
Quite a few. And yet you've picked, of all the countries that you've known, you've picked this little corner of France, the Basque country. Why did you make up your mind about that?
Well, it was right after the liberation in France. I came down and took one look and fell in love with it.
I could understand that. I came down, took one look, and fell in love with it. But I think you're partly responsible, you and your family, because your feeling for this country is very contagious. I was only a few hours here, and I was beginning to feel very warmly indeed toward the Basques. And now I'm really very, very much an enthusiast. Not just to the country, it's a very beautiful country, of course, but it's the people that I think are so exceptional. I wonder why.
I don't know that I'd explain the Basque, which nobody can, but I think that quality of country comes from the people, because you get among these people, for one thing, just like the landscape, and perhaps that's why the landscape feels that way so much, you get a tremendous sense of tranquility. They're not worried about the future.
They're not worried about the future. They live for today.
It's not a question of living for today. They figure they've survived everything, will continue to survive. It's a kind of sense of dignity and of pride and of a business of being so close to each other that they have a sense of nothing being able to happen to them. They consider they've been occupied for, I don't know how many hundreds of years now.
Well, they're really the Aboriginals, aren't they? They're the first, there's always been the talk about the mysterious Basque language. Where does it come from and all that? Because, of course, they do here in the Basque country and on the other side of the mountains. In the Spanish Basque country, they speak a language which has no roots in any known European language. Isn't that right?
There are one or two odd theories which one scholar will present and another one disagree with.
Yes.
But the only convincing theory about the Basque language I ever heard were two. One was that it was the language of the Garden of Eden. This was
really?
For a while. And the other was...
Maybe it is.
That it was the language of the devil. So you can have your choice.
Well, the Basques have certainly been here a long time. We know that they've been here longer than anybody else in Europe.
Well, these people are proud of their past, and they're easy in the present, and they're not afraid of the future.
Well, that's a beautiful phrase and a wonderful formula, Lael, and I agree with two-thirds of it, if you forgive me. I think that they certainly aren't afraid of the future, and I envy them for that, because I think most of us are. And easy in the present is something very few civilized people are. And forgive me, I don't think the Basques are totally civilized in the pure sense of that word, because civilization does imply city culture by definition. And these people don't have a city culture. And I don't see how you can say, and here's where I begin my argument, how you can say that they're proud of their past, because although they have the longest one in Europe, it's only a past in the sense that they've been here, not in the sense that they've done a lot. And you can only be proud of your past if, well, I don't know, if you've built a pyramid or have a library full of books to show for your past. Dignity can mean, of course, a lot of things. It can imply a certain pomposity or rigidity of behavior, at least. Certainly there's nothing about the dignity of the Basque that's rigid. But formal, perhaps.
They're formal till they know you awfully well. I really think their dignity comes from self-possession.
A true self-possession.
A true self-possession.
Yes.
Every Basque owns himself. They give a piece to the world, very polite, very nice. They give a piece to this town.
And a piece to their family.
A lot to the family.
Family is a very important part.
Family's a tremendous thing.
Yes.
In the Basque country.
It's the big unit, isn't it? More important even than the town. And
yes.
But of course, we're very near the Spanish border, and everybody knows that in Spain, the ladies, at least up until very recent moments in history, and even now to a good extent, are kept locked up at home a good deal.
Not the Basque. Try and lock up a Basque lady. They were grand. During the war, during the occupation, during all periods of trouble, the women were superb.
Yeah.
Mademoiselle Maggie.
Oh, I know her. She runs that little restaurant.
That lovely little old maid up
by
on
the border. That's a little restaurant just by the Spanish border, and she's a marvelous old gal. And it's a pretty good restaurant, too.
It's a good restaurant. During the war, the Germans knew it was a good restaurant, too, and they came to eat. In the meantime...
In their great numbers.
In their great... Lots of them.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, Mademoiselle Maggie was hiding aviators and refugees.
In great numbers.
In great numbers.
In the cellar.
Take them across, let them get across
and
the
entertaining the Germans up above. I remember I saw the guest book of this restaurant. It was filled with the names of German...
Hauptmann,
and all that and so on.
That.
They'd all been scratched out by the old lady on the day of liberation, wasn't it? With great fierce strokes of the pencil.
Took a pencil and...
Well, she was very brave about that, and the ladies are brave, but I'd like to speak a word now, if I may, in behalf of the bravery of the Basque men. Here's a friend of mine called Gabriel Lamarck. Notice the steel teeth. His real ones were knocked out by the Germans. Here's his son, Jean-Pierre. Nice boy. When Jean-Pierre was this age, that's his photo, the Germans made him prisoner. Kept him for days, torturing him, telling him his father was dead. They tried everything. What they wanted, of course, was names and facts. Little Jean-Pierre knew the facts and the names, but he didn't give up so much as an initial. Basques don't talk. Oh, by the way, Monsieur Lamarck would like his boy to spend a year in some English or American home. Maybe a boy of the same age could come and stay with the Lamarcks. Nice people. Well, I think it's wonderful, Leo, for a Basque father, particularly for a Basque father, because these are very conservative people, Basques, to want his child to have the experience of living in another country with other sorts of people.